So I'm just about to head off of work. And while I was here, I had a really good idea about what I wanted to talk about tonight. And so I wrote it down on my hand. I also thought it'd be kind of cool to show you my view from my window. So here it is. Pretty crazy, right? Alright, I'll see you guys in a minute. Alright, so I made it home. It's hot in here. Alright, so tonight I kind of wanted to talk to everybody about something that's been on my mind a little bit as I have been thinking about a lot of things. Kind of wanted to talk about my past and things that I've struggled with. I get messages a lot from you guys asking me questions. Where do I find the strength for this? How would you suggest getting courage for that? Well, can't help you out there. I wish I could. I wish there was some sort of formula for courage or bravery or, in my case, foolhardiness, stubbornness, things like that. But there's not. When it comes down to it, we're all responsible for our own fate. And we're all responsible for where we turn out, and that's what keeps me going. That's why I'm here in New York. So let me start out. My name is Aaron. And I'm a drug addict. I have never been to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, but throughout my life I've really struggled with things like drugs and addiction. You know, when I try and get rid of one addiction, I just replace it with another. When I was 14, I had my first drink of beer. I've met people who had their first drink of beer when they were 6, you know, but it doesn't make it any harder for me. The reason I did it was I wanted to be cool. When I was 15 or 16 was when I had my first puff of marijuana smoke. I forget why I did it. I think I'd had a fight with my parents that night and wanted to do something that would piss them off. I'd been, pressured to do drugs by friends of mine who did them before, and I'd always taken the no way man, that's not for me sort of approach, but this time I went out seeking it. And I went over and I knocked on my friend's door and I said, hey, do you have any pot? He did, and so we smoked and drove around and got high and things like that, and started buying from him. Started getting into the really nice stuff, where you're paying like $80 for a really small amount. My drug of choice when I was 18 was shrooms. I loved shrooms, and I loved hallucinating, and I loved not being in my body and not being conscious. And that started because I started getting stronger and stronger drugs. I started smoking weed that was laced with cocaine or acid or heroin, and got pretty hardcore into shrooming. And it came to a peak one night. It was in February. I met up with about 6 or 7 friends, and the plan was we were going to eat a bunch of shrooms and go out to the hot spring and shroom all day. And we got our shrooms, and these shrooms were from Japan, and they were very expensive and they were very potent. I ate a whole ounce to myself. This was at 11 in the morning on a Saturday. After, hanging out outside and everything, we watched the sun go down. I was still fucked up. Somehow I drove all these people back to my house. I was living at the time behind a couch, and the place was a wreck. And they started tearing up the place. They started tearing my house apart. I couldn't stand it. I was freaking out. I told them that, well, they should go. I'll stay. I stayed there alone. It's about 8 o'clock at night by now. I was laying in my bed trying to sleep. The walls of my house burst into flames and melt and disintegrate. And so I turned off the lights and I was going to go to sleep and it would all be over soon. I remember, it's all going to be over soon. It's all going to be over soon. And that's when I heard this laughter. This deep laughter coming from my bathroom. I sat up and I looked over and there was red light pouring out of my bathroom. And I had just barely turned the light in my bathroom off. I said, oh my God, what's happening? These heads, severed heads, bleeding all over the place, with long snouts and huge fangs, and fur and flaming eyes came flying out of this room. And they were flying around my head. And they were telling me, kill yourself, kill yourself. Go get the knife. Go get the knife. It's right there in the kitchen. Kill yourself, kill yourself. I was freaking out. I was curled up in my covers and hiding, and I could hear it. And that's why I sat up and I looked over again. And I saw the devil walked out of my bathroom. And he looked at me. And he said, kill yourself. Come, get the knife. Do it. Do it. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. So I started to pray, harder than I've ever prayed in my life. I was so sorry. I prayed for anything. And as I was finishing my prayer, my phone rang. And I picked it up and it was my dad. I was crying at this time. I was a complete mess. And my dad was just calling to make sure I was okay. Just calling to check in. And I wasn't okay. And I told him that. And I told him that he needed to come pick me up. And I got back to my parents' house and I went in and I talked with my mom. And, I've always been close with my mom ever since I moved out. I remember I was laying on her lap, my head on her lap. I was curled up there and I was just bawling. Just bawling. Couldn't believe the stuff I'd put them through. And that was last night that I did drugs. My food's here. Got it. People ask how you get courage or how you get strength or bravery. It's always been with me that you reach a breaking point where you just can't push yourself any farther. And all of a sudden you have to do it. And that's what happened with my transition. I just couldn't do it any longer. And I had to transition. I had to do it. I couldn't live in Utah any longer. I had to move. I had to move. It's been a long, hard road, but I've overcome a lot of my issues and things like that. It's just not the life for me. It's not what I want. It doesn't make me happy. That's my past with addictions. So what kind of things have you been able to overcome in your life? What kind of problems have you been able to solve? What kind of addictions have you had to fight? As always, I love hearing from you guys with your video comments and your stories or things like that. And I love the comments and keep sending me questions and messages and things like that. It keeps my mind going, and I always make sure that I write back to everybody that writes me. At least I do my best to do that. Anyway, see you guys later. Bye.